Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, ask a special guest to choose a Doctor Who story. I'll watch it, commentate along, dropping in facts and observations, all the while trying to guess what my guest's favourite thing about each instalment might be.
Hello there, Toby. This is Martin calling. Martin Holmes, the podcast guy. For this week's edition, I would very much like for you to watch all 4 episodes of The 10th Planet, which, as I'm sure everybody listening already knows, features William Hartnell's final regular appearance as the Doctor, and was first broadcast in October 1966.
Hello everybody, I'm here in the warm as the frozen wastes do what they do outside, as winter continues to have its icy grip upon Haydock Towers. So I'm inside watching from the comfort of my own home episode 2 of The 10th Planet. I'm rather delighted that over on Patreonville this has been greeted with a huge amount of celebration because, as Martin and I discussed, I mean independently, it's you know, we record our stuff on separate days and then piece it together at the end, and but yes, we both sort of mused upon the fact that this is a story that doesn't seem to be sort of held as an all-time classic anymore. It's obviously known to be remarkable because of the Cybermen and because of the regeneration, but everything else gets sort of, as you know, as an entity, it's been sort of, I think it's been slightly sort of lost. Whereas, as I say, back in the day, it was definitely in the top 5 of any sort of polls that listed Hartnell stories. We will come to look at why, and I think the story itself is perhaps something that might deserve even opprobrium being heaped upon it, and yet it doesn't seem to matter. And so I'm emboldened by the comments that you're about to hear, because everyone seems very fond of this, and I was wondering if I maybe downplayed it, because last time I had it on I was sort of half watching it, and as I say, it's I think my enjoyment of it because it had been, back in the day, it had been a bit more modern, whereas I think I'd found a lot of earlier Hartnells a bit harder because of the pace, because of the production. This one seemed to a viewer, as I was in the sort of late 80s, I mean I was watching it just after 1986, it seemed closer to the Doctor Who of the time, and certainly of the Doctor Who that I'd imagined Doctor Who to be like when I was a kid. And that's why I chose for part 1, you know, the sort of the realism of it, and the style of production and the style of story. But anyway, Martin is going to be a cheery and jolly advocate, but he is not alone, as Darcy Smart said almost immediately upon the release of this. Yes! This is one I've been waiting to be covered since I became a listener. One of my all-time favourite comfort stories. This one goes on any time something terrible happens. I literally exclaimed out loud when I saw the notification. I'm a bloody tragic. Can't wait to listen. Well, I'm very pleased, Darcy, but in a way I hope you never watch it again, because I don't want anything terrible to happen to you. But perhaps you could watch it without the being steered there by fate, and could just enjoy it, without the context of awful things happening around you. And Guy Lambert replied to Darcy and said, "It is comfort viewing, isn't it? I don't know why, but maybe it's because it's all freezing outside and they're stuck inside in a really intimate space." Frank Shale says some of the background goings on, like some of the crew's interaction with the spy George Blake's escape, are more interesting than the actual story, which is a bit of a mess, but a magnificent mess. I must have read the target book of this one a dozen times. Yeah, George Blake was a spy who escaped from Wormwood Scrubs in October 1966, when The 10th Planet was being made. I can't remember the story, Frank, and you don't go into any detail. You just show that you know the story. Well done. Very Doctor Who fan way to behave. Do we talk about it in the commentary? Quite possibly. In the actual BBC commentary, I've done a ton of those, and it slightly rings a bell. Anyway, yeah. I mean, Frank thinks that's more interesting than the story itself. I don't know. It's not. I haven't remembered the details, if I did ever know them, as much as I remember details of the 10th Planet. So that's I would say that's over to that's a matter of opinion. But yeah, George Blake did a bunk. He was assisted in escaping from Wormwood Scrubs. Did he bump into the crew? Was part of his disguise to be an extra in the 10th Planet? I'm sure Frank will tell us once he's listened to me reprimanding him here for being vague. Robbie Carnegie says, this is the first time I've watched the 10th Planet, only familiar with it through the Target book, and I'm really enjoying it. The computer code on the titles, the sense of the base bustling with life and people doing a skilled job there. Yeah, I mean, that was part of my choice, Robbie. I do feel that all of that adds to what Derek Martinus and does with the story and the feel of it. The two astronauts sweating in space, the snow effects, the Doctor's doom-laden face and Ben's concerned expression behind him, the guard's fear as the Cybermen approached. It also shows the importance of good sound effects. The silence around the Cybermen makes them slightly unthreatening at present, whereas some good karate chop noises for them attacking the base's team would have made it feel more dramatic. Looking forward to part 2. I hadn't considered that, Robbie. I actually quite like the silence, but I wouldn't have objected to a chop either. Jack Sharp says, I've just started watching Blake 7 for the first time with the new Blu-rays, and it was nice seeing General Cutler in the first episode. Yeah, I think it's a strange sort of symmetry, isn't it, that Robert Beatty is in the end of a Doctor Who era, the last William Hartnell story, and the beginning of another, the first episode of Blake 7, where he's a good guy. I do enjoy this story, and I lament that it's so rarely discussed as a story, as most of the discussion is around the debut of the Cybermen and the first regeneration. My first experience of this story was with the DVD when I brought it in 2013. I'm currently showing a friend Doctor Who for the first time. Controversially, I've started her on the 60s and she's loving it, and we've just watched the Faceless ones. She wasn't as keen on the 10th Planet as I was, although I think she was happy for a brief reprieve from the constant 60s Dalek stories. On the accent thing, I'm reminded of Joseph First and people complaining about him putting on a ridiculous comedy accent, when actually that's his real accent. Quite right, Jack. Frank Shales, Frank adds, and also Andre Moran in The Moonbase as Benoit. I believe it was Sue Perryman in Adventures with the Wife in Space, which is excellent, by the way, if you've not come across it, do avail yourself of it, who complained about his ridiculous French accent. Haha, sorry, Sue, says Frank. Nick Mellish says, I always enjoyed this story. I got a Whisper It telesnap reconstruction of it when I was around 13 or 14, and I loved it. The murky quality of the sound and picture of my copy meant the snow felt properly oppressive and added a real sense of claustrophobia in the base. Lovely stuff. Adam Parkin says this was an interesting one for me as a cyber fan and thinking they work best in black and white. My first exposure was brief, intriguing clips at the end of the end of episode 1 reveal and the Have You No Emotions bit from episode 2 on Cybermen the early years. I read the Target novel several times and liked it, but only saw it when the DVD came out. For context, I was born the year this was set. Oh, Adam, you youngster. I should dig it out again, as I've not watched it in a few years. Adam adds, another memory from around 12 years ago. I remember meeting Annika Wills at Valiant and trying to reassure her that the animation wouldn't be like Disney and instead be quite stylised. But it was hard. She hadn't seen anything comparable that I had, e.g. Waltz with Bashir. Paul Dunn says, I love this one, Toby, one of my favourites. I understand you're disquiet at being taken in by the April's Fool about the 10th Planet 4 in colour. I was looking forward to the Phoenix Rises for years. The Phoenix Rises was another Doctor Who magazine, April Fool, that was centred around the supposed filming of part of Malcolm Hulke's Hidden Planet tale. David Gillespie Pratt says, I think this is one of my favourite comfort Doctor Who stories. That's 3 comforts. So obviously the various, the disparate elements of this that maybe, I suppose, come to be familiar in Doctor Who, even though they're fresh here in terms of the chronology of the show, make this a very comforting experience for many. It was my first ever bootleg in the 90s, and it was a naughty thrill at the time. Very different from the sorts of videos my school friends had. I think this explains my mild obsession with this story. Hartnell has no big line fluffs in this story and sticks pretty much to the script. Robert Beatty, however, is one of the actors who gives approximations of his dialogue sometimes. And again, my apologies to Steve Plytas for sharing his F-bomb. David has done some great work on Twitter, and some of it centered around this story on Twitter/X. But I think I just click on it and go to, I presume he's got a YouTube channel. I can't remember, but he does videos. Find them. One of which he did share the clip on Twitter, which I've had the pleasure of then showing to Richard Bates, who was one of the key players on the Avengers at the time, of Steve Plytas in an episode of the Avengers, fluffing a line, dropping the F-bomb under his breath, but on a Blackman gamely carrying on, and the scene continuing, and the F kind of staying there. So isn't that a glorious thing to see? It's almost a shame we don't have any of those in Doctor Who. Anthony Carroll says, great story. First base under siege, first Cybermen, first invasion of Earth depicted happening. First mad boss? ? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. 8 out of 10. Jason Thompson says, I love how unique the story is. The naturalistic approach that has very normal people doing their jobs. The way the dialogue sometimes overlaps. The non-flashy outfits. Yeah, so people were going with my thing for episode 1 too, which I'm pleased about. Is David Doddermead the first person in Doctor Who to wear a jumper? Do you know, Jason, I think he might be, and God bless you for pointing that out. This is the stuff that we need. Dr. Barclay is the first jumper wearer in... in the whole of Doctor Who. I'm just trying to think if there's anyone in the War Machines, or maybe on the Empire State Building in the Chase that has a jumper, or in the Planet of Giants. They'd be the ones. I can't think of any jumpers, but if anyone wants to go and freeze frame, haha. One odd thing. As clever as the set design is, why does a polar base control room have an observation area? How many observers do they expect to visit the pole? And even if you did have one, would you really hold 3 unexplained intruders in an area where they can clearly see and hear everything going on in main control? Well, no, I suppose it's like the guarding someone in a corridor in Enemy of the World, isn't it? Martin already stole my comment about being able to see the sellotape holding the Cybermen together, which was not visible on my fuzzy bootleg copy, so I won't go on about that again. I do want to address the misconception that more than one factual book or article, including a recent DWM Fact of Fiction feature, has made about that opening shot, describing it as one of the Gemini mission launches. It's not. It's Blue Streak missile test flight F3 from Woomera, Australia. Blue Streak was a British medium-range ballistic missile that was cancelled before going into production, but had 3 successful test launches. There's one, or a muck-up at least, at the National Space Centre in Sheffield. Oh, this is good. This is the stuff, Jason. Thanks. We're getting facts here. That being said, there is some actual Gemini footage in the episode. The shot through the window of the tumbling spacecraft is actually re-entry footage from one of the Gemini flights, probably the unmanned Gemini 2, from early 1965. The 2-man Gemini program was still in progress at the time of production and transmission, with Gemini 11 being in September 1966 and Gemini 12, which closed the program, launching in November that year. In that respect, this was a very topical story. That's really interesting and useful stuff, Jason. Thank you very much. Yes, and one forgets when something is part of history that, yes, obviously writers and program makers are responding to what's going on at the time. And, space was all the rage, and so Doctor Who is responding. So it must have felt extremely modern. Joe Llewellyn says, I really enjoyed both your commentary, thanks, Joe, and the guest's enthusiasm. Yeah, he's great, isn't he? That was a lot of fun. No issues with the American accents. And Joe is an American. The uniforms were all over the place, especially for December 1986, only about 6 months before I enlisted in the US Army. Those weren't the correct uniforms for 1966 either, but who cares? Great episode. Debut of a great monster. A historic story. Guy Lambert says, one of those stories where I don't care about whether it's a good story, I just love the scale and feel of it. Everyone pushing the limits of creativity. Beautiful. Yes, I'm with you on that. Sometimes, Guy, I think it doesn't matter if a story or script or plot is good, if other, good in inverted commas, if other elements sort of take precedence and make it an enjoyable experience, which means you don't really care, and it and paper over any sort of logical inconsistencies or lack of progression or whatever, if it's still exciting. I remember a friend of mine who hates Earthshock going, well, the plot, the script is bad, and I'm all about script and story, and I'm like, well, I am too if it's a story where that's the most important thing. But I think with Earthshock, it's the action and adventure that's really important. So I forgive it. some of it's stuff that if you examine it too closely, you go, oh, God, blimey, that's a bit. They're lucky to get away with that. But that's for another commentary. John Deere says, in many ways, this reminds me of a season 22 story. The Doctor isn't the proactive hero, and the focus is on the guest characters. Here, it feels more interesting in the way Caves of Androzani did before that became the default that works against both Colin Baker's time and the series in general. The 10th Planet is significant for its circumstances and enjoyable for things that aren't the story. It's vibes, as the kids might say. Oh dear. And Matt from Metabolus III has a suggestion about new series episodes. So Matt has clearly been listening to the bit after the credits and after various bits of pluggage, but that's not right for here because we are going to watch episode 2 of the 10th Planet. This is an episode I briefly dallied with a local group, and I helped them set up the first meeting. And we chose 3 episodes to watch, and it had been the 3 episodes that I definitely earmarked 1 episode from each Doctor to sort of everyone gather together and watch as good examples of Doctor Who. And I chose episode 2 of the 10th Planet, episode 1 of the Web of Fear, and get this, because I didn't know Received Wisdom, episode 3 of the Claws of Axos. I love the bit where the Axon goes into the base and kills Derek Martin and blows up a running unit soldier. Episode 2 of 10th Planet, because there are various bits in this that I absolutely adore, and we're going to watch them now. So if you would like to join me, I think it's time to watch from the beginning, episode 2 of the 10th Planet, and we're going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So here we go. We're starting from the beginning. Episode 2 of the 10th Planet. Sort of the last hurrah of William Hartnell as the Doctor, really, because he's not in it next week. And episode 4, he is quite, he's very much on the periphery. And also, we don't have that episode, the visuals at least. So this is the last existing episode of William Hartnell, actually giving his first Doctor. David Gillespie Pratt has been in touch with me, by the way, to point out that this reprise, although it looks very, very similar, if you play it close together with last week's episode ending, there are actual subtle differences. So it's a refilm, even though it doesn't look like it, which is very interesting. But I have to say, great continuity acting from Reg Whitehead playing the Cyberman, and I mean, not that anybody at the time would have had anything other than the memory of last week, but they clearly did it, immediately afterwards, and pretty much did exactly the same thing again. So well done them. So here we go. It's that bustle again that everybody talks about. Nobody's hanging around waiting for the camera to be on them. Everyone's doing their jobs. It's populated by sort of Dr. Barclay has a drink. It's little things like people having a drink that just make things seem a little realistic. Now, I mean, I love the Cybermen. I love this snowy scene. I think it's very, very well mounted. The snow gives it a lovely atmosphere and feeling. Derek Martinus, he got a lot of snow in his Doctor Who time because he handles some in the ice whereas that's pretty grim, isn't it? That the what's left of our poor friends is having the snow going over it. So here we are. Here's Steve Plytas, Kurt the chef in the famous Fawlty Towers episode. Oh, and here's Glenn Beck, who I had the pleasure of hooking up with in Oxford, I think. Glenn and I hooked up. Glenn is still around. He's in Doctor Strangelove as well. He was an actor, again, a genuine accent, but he was based in the UK at the time, so he got lots of American parts. Although I think he's Canadian. And rather amazing that he's actually some voices next week as well, uncredited. But he's in this very, very brief scene, and and yet there I was talking to him, 50 years later or whatever. But I was pleased to get him because he's not on the DVD commentary nor in the documentary. But I got to talk to him about his experience on the show. Stanley Davis is the very Spanish-looking extra there, and Ellen Cullen playing Wigner's aide again has she's got an accent. I think she's putting an accent on, but it's giving this a sort of international feel. I quite like the Wigner scenes because it feels like we're reaching out to the seats of power and influence that show that these events are having an impact beyond where we are. Which I think helps the scale of the story, if you like. And here we have the arrival of the Cybermen in. It's worth pointing out. Oh, boom shot, boom mic. The worst disguise. I mean, it's very hard to disguise a Cyberman, and it's perhaps a suggestion that General Cutler's not perhaps the commander he thinks he is, because if he goes and tells the sergeant what to do, based on the fact that he's got a cloak on, but not on the fact he's got a massive lamp for a head and silver legs. But that's okay. We kind of accept it, and I do love the heights that these Cybermen have, and Peter Kindred's set helps because I think Cutler was on his way down to a lower level because this set's got 3 levels on it actually. So that helped him seem dwarfed as well. So Reg Whitehead is the main Cyberman here. I've always been very fond of Reg Whitehead, and when Doctor Who monsters were being interviewed back in the day, nobody seemed to have found or be bothered to find Reg, but he did turn up later, and we got him in time for the DVDs, which I'm very pleased about. He's not on the commentary for this, but he is on the documentary. We got one of the other Cybermen for the commentary. This is because we'd started to talk to each other, because Chris Chapman had got Reg for the documentary. We decided to look for Greg Palmer, 2Gs, who's also in Patrick Troughton's last story, The War Games, and he's one of the other 2 Cybermen, and he's one of the other 2 Cybermen, and his real name is actually Donald van der Marten, which nobody had known until it was pointed out to me by a chap called Ben Jolly, who helps us find Doctor Who actors, who's been brilliant at doing that under his own steam for years. And so we got in touch with Donald, and he flew over from Holland, where he lives, and so we got somebody that had not done an interview before. So that was all very exciting. I love this scene. This would be a scene I would show in a clip show. I love this confrontation, and I really like the fact that David Doddermead's contribution to it, because it's sort of, and look at the framing of that, Hartnell being imperious at the back, Ben looking on incredulous, but it's led by the nice scientist Dr. Barclay, played by David Doddermead, who's great, and Polly gets all the lines, which I think's fabulous. And I, of course, before I saw them speak, of course, I knew that different actors did this. This is a great line. That was really most unfortunate. You should not have done that. But he gives it a sort of jutting jaw, as if to show that the emotionless Cyberman is not particularly pleased. He looks quite cross there. You can see through the sock does not hide all emotions. This gentleman here with Wigner is Chris Conneals, who was in the Crusade. Again, nice to see another performer of colour sort of bulking out the cast. But I love that. I love that confrontation between Polly and saying what you don't care, and he goes, no, why should I care? But I remember it only occurred to me a split second before they started talking. I thought, oh, different actors doing the voice, so how are they gonna? Are their mouths not going to move? How are they? Because obviously with later Cybermen, they don't have mobile mouths. They have slits in sort of metal masks until you get to David Banks, where David Banks is doing the voice. So you can see the mouth moving because he's doing. But I remember thinking just before they started talking, but how are they going to do this? Because they can't mime to it, surely. But also they can't keep their mouths closed. No, so what they do, which I sort of thought was slightly absurd at the time, was they just sort of open their gobs and the sound comes out. Now, though, I love it because it's sort of again, it's that body horror where other people see sticky tape. But to me, the slightly comical voice as well is a bit like a speak and spell machine. It is a bit like generated speech because the patterns aren't quite right. Now, obviously, we've got AI now that is pretty damn good, and scarily so. I just heard something the other day, and I thought, my goodness, as a voice artist, I'm not wild about that. But this is why it's important that I know things about actors, because I'm making myself before I get consigned to the B arc, I'm making myself invaluable because they may be able to generate somebody talking about Doctor Who, but to the inane levels that I can about the supporting actors, I doubt it. Does Dyson say, is that the bit where he says just before this, for God's sake, Barclay, do as he asked, do you want the place died? I always thought him saying for God's sake seemed really, really grown up. We don't, you have to be quite careful about saying, making sort of religiously flavoured outbursts in Doctor Who, because it's kid stuff, and that's, in the 60s as well. That would be quite a strong ejaculation, But I love the way he gestures around as if he and his colleagues may use this thing. It's sort of like, make yourselves at home, everybody. Let them do the thing. Now, obviously, they iron that out, and they do change the speech, and they change the design. But I cherish these Cybermen. I can see they're way too bulky, of course, to be practical. They're very noisy. I think it is awkward having the voice coming out of a mouth I think I prefer it when they just open their gob and the noise comes out than when he sort of tries to do the speaky thing. Of course, thank goodness Ben is under contract, because if he'd just been a non-speaking artist like the last guy to brandish a submachine gun, he'd have just been killed. But because he's a regular, instead the Cyberman decides to show his strength and bend the gun and then give Ben detention in the film room, whereas was it Joe pointed out? Somebody pointed out that yes, there's a James Bond film on in the big. But yes, I do actually rather like the fact that if it was synthesized speech, it wouldn't need to purse its lips and move its tongue in the way that we do to produce sounds. And so it has, quite a plausible sound and it's a menacing one if you're so inclined. And I have to say, when I did a thing called Cyberman for Big Finish, it was the first thing I did. I sort of played my own version of an intense commander. It's a sort of part that I'm surprised they didn't ask Prentice Hancock to do, because it would have been right up his street. And I remember the first scene I had where I think I discovered a tape and I heard the Cyberman voice, and Nick Briggs was there because he directed it as well, and he did the voice, and I assumed it would be treated afterwards, and it wasn't. So when it came through over my headphones, and I couldn't see Nick because I was in a separate booth, and the voice came in, it sent shivers down my spine. It made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, because it can be really inhuman and disconcerting. And I think we've established, when talking about Doctor Who, all of us in many of our sort of fan assessments of the show, the slight perversion of something that is real is almost scarier than just, a big green blob or something like that. Something, a kid with a gas mask, a scary statue, something that is like something but just perverts it, and the cyber voice is a strange, discordant perversion of not only our voice but our speech patterns. So if you are so inclined, it can sound really creepy and unpleasant. Also, if you're so inclined, it can sound like a civil servant played by Zippy from Rainbow. But I like the voices. I like the design. I can completely see why both were removed, but I love the fact that they exist. I love the fact that they're part of the evolution of the Cybermen. I love this. I love this stock music. It's all stock music in this, and a lot of this was on a cassette that Dwas released called Space Adventure. and this is terrible. Great shot of Dudley Jones there, playing Dyson. That was part originally offered to. They were going to offer to Bernard Hepton, but in rewrites it got smaller, so they thought an actor of his stature wouldn't do it, shouldn't be offered it even, which is a shame because Hepton was a great actor who should have been in Doctor Who. This is going to be it, isn't it? And I loved meeting Alan White and Earl Cameron. I love the fact they were both in Doctor Who. I love the fact I was present at their reunion, and they actually don't do that much in it, but they're important characters, and I think they both do a lovely job. And I think Earl Cameron, the fact that he was one of Doctor Who's centenarians. There's loads of them now. There's 3 as I record this. Turned 3 this. No, two turned 100 this year. Professor Rubish and Mr. Ollis, and we have Bellal as well. I do rather like the interview that he does as well. There are elements of this that are quite quaint, but I don't mind them. They don't spoil it for me, because again I see Doctor Who as an evolving process, and I can't, just because of what came afterwards with the Cybermen, where they're slightly less chatty, now some people have interpreted Dyson there as saying Ernest John. I always thought he said, "My name is John Dyson," and he's John Dyson in the book. I think it's been written up, I think in the Doctor Who Encyclopedia and in a couple of other things, that he says Ernest John Dyson. In the script he says Clement John Dyson. So, but it doesn't really matter. But it's interesting that even something that we have the script for and loads of different people have watched, there are different opinions. I love the way, I mean, you can see the wires and everything, and there's loads hanging off them. I think, and it's really odd, isn't it, that it does that rare thing that while people are still talking, it just sort of fades out. We normally get sharper cuts than that, but they decide to sort of go out on the noise where the Cyberman is being sort of heckled by everybody and taking it in his stride, to be fair. But yeah, there is you can see why they gave the Cybermen less to do and decide that they are more effective as less chatty fellows in the 60s, and they work particularly well in the Invasion, where Tobias Vaughan is the mouthpiece to handle all of the action. It's not a James Bond film. Look, it's a Western, and I'm sure people know which Western it is. That's the sort of thing that's out there, but I haven't bothered I didn't need to find out because somebody already knew. And this is, I quite like this because it was a thing that happened. I remember in an Eagle comic that I was reading once, that the goody shot a German guard, and he sort of said, "Rather you than me, mate," sort of thing. And it's that idea that if you sometimes our heroes kill people, but because, as Ben says, you didn't give me no alternative, and it's not gung ho and it's not cool. It's a kind of, well, you've made me do it, and I quite like that acknowledgement. Oh, and it's this shot. Is the shot that illustrates the Doctor Who magazine article, which is and it has been colorized and then this shot, this clip of Hartnell doing Love, Pride, Hate, Fear. Of course, it's famously used in Twice Upon a Time, but also where I knew it. Because I'd got this before I got Earthshock Part 2, although I had seen Earthshock Part 2, but I'd not remembered the details of the clips. But Love, Pride, Hate, Fear. Have You No Emotion? So was shown in episode 2 of Earthshock, where the Cybermen very kindly gave us a flashback to past adventures, which in the older days was Goldust. Love that shot of, brace yourself, listener, General Cutler's head between the Cyberman's legs. But it is a fantastic shot, and Peter Kindred's set really gives them a chance to play around with the levels and the way that Martinez, and sometimes the received wisdom is that Martinez, doesn't have a great time on Galaxy 4, which is a slightly messy production, because he takes over it quite late in the day. But the positioning of his actors to make the shots have depth or to look attractive or to have dynamics in is present there in Galaxy 4, and it's certainly present here. And I do feel sorry for the Cybermen who have to fall over, because I bet that's it's a pretty painful maneuver. And I always think, God, when you fall over and you've got a big torch like that on your head, I suspect that you have to be pretty careful not to knock your own brains out. Yes, Cutler is the beginning of a long line of people who would never have passed the aptitude test. A psychological profile would not have got them the job. But I remember actually when we showed this episode, there were some people in this local group meeting who said, actually this is a bad episode of Doctor Who. It's full of absolute cliches, and it was completely news to me. And I suppose it, because I was young and I wasn't on the lookout for such things. General Cutler's son is the one going up in the capsule and all that sort of thing. But I kind of don't care. And it's amazing what you forgive, isn't it? I forgive the Hinchcliffe era for some of its bad endings in the way that I might not forgive another story. I remember when, one of the sort of discussions about the demons was always, well, it's a great story, but the ending is rubbish. The ending is rubbish, and Azal's defeat is, stands up to no scrutiny whatsoever and comes out of nowhere. But it's not what I think about when I think about the demons now. And there are whole swathes of problems with this script in terms of structure, in terms of the Doctor's involvement, in terms of the plot, in terms of some of the motivations. And yet what Derek Martinus and his cast and his designer and the debuting monsters do is distract us from all of that. It feels quite pacey, considering there's no very slow walking around corridors exploring or anything like that. Everybody's under a bit of pressure. Everybody's having to act. Even that extra there, he's got his sort of fish clenched because Stanley Davis, because because something. The first interplanetary war, the scale of this is huge. And again, some lovely stock music and some stock footage, which has been fitted in pretty nicely. And again, this feels... it's been pointed out at the beginning of this by one of our correspondents, just what a topical story this is. And this is the Hartnell era of, time tracks and weirdness and comedy historicals or Shakespearean historicals or quite sort of TV comic-y, spacey, adventure-y things, or weird and wacky adventures in space and time. And suddenly... This is modern and sweaty and militaristic, and I think if I was a Doctor Who fan at the time, I would be feeling that my show was really growing up. Now, Doctor Who loses its whimsy at great cost, but for this point in its history, I think this is adding a great ingredient to the show. I do like his telephone's a bit like the telephones in The Prisoner, isn't it? It's one where the dialy thing is on the bottom. Hartnell's brilliant. Let's have a look at Hartnell, because his eyes are darting about, but he's, instead of doing it sort of confrontational, he's almost sort of detached from it, going, there's no point knocking heads with this buffoon, because he's just, he's all mouth and no trousers, and it would be a waste of energy. And the Doctor is sort of above that and detached from it, but his eyes aren't, his eyes aren't letting go of the fact that this is a deadly situation. I think Hartnell's great in this episode. I love the fact that we have that have you no emotions speech from him, especially as but we get a little thing that he's sitting there. Now here's Christopher Matthews, star of The Scars of Dracula. I worked with Chris in theatre years and years ago, and I'm so pleased he gets the cliffhanger. He was a bit of an old roue, Chris. I liked him, a real charismatic man, but not the fresh-faced young innocent you see there. He was very convivial and saucy. I like Chris a lot. My mum did. I think my mum fancied him. In fact, I know she did. And he was in his I would think his 50s then, or the late 40s. Yeah, 50s I should think, when I worked with him. And then we got him on the commentary for this, and he was a sort of sweet old man. It was like, gosh, yeah, time. But yeah, lovely that Chris gets the gets the cliffhanger. I salute Earl Cameron and Alan White. Bless them. I'm fond of both of those men. And I love that cliffhanger. I used to sort of play that cliffhanger. Sometimes I used to act out scenes at home in my bedroom, and that was one of them. Yes, I know some people would play keepy uppy, some people would write stories, some people would do all sorts of exciting things, listen to pop music. Well, I would reenact scenes from Doctor Who, and that was definitely one that I enjoyed reenacting. It's a really exciting cliffhanger, and again, it feels sort of modern and thrilling, and the cliffhanger would be one of my choices for my favourite thing. I like that it feels a bit different. I like, there's a personal thing, I like the fact that it gets Chris Matthews a lovely close up, and that a sort of supporting character gets to add the real sense of climax to it. I always like a cliffhanger that is not the Doctor going, and we shall all be, and we're all doomed, or somebody coming in and threatening the Doctor or the companion and saying, kill them now. I like it when it's something to do with the plot advancing, or something that turns the plot on a sixpence, or that gives an added new jeopardy or energy to it. So I love that cliffhanger, and it feels entirely in keeping with the story that we're watching, which is one of modern spacefaring and radars and bases and military and all of that. I love Hartnell's speech. Love, pride, hate, fear, have you no emotion, sir? Partially because we're slightly more familiar with it, because we have it out of context of this story, because we have it, mostly for me, from Earthshock 2, but also it is used to have Hartnell transform into David Bradley in Twice Upon a Time, which is of course very linked with this story. So it must be a fun story for people who've come to Who via modern who their first experience of the 10th Planet will have been that, and then they've probably at some point gone back to see the original and sort of fill in the bits in between and see where it came from. It's funny how our different approaches from the different directions that we come to Who from will inform our experience and opinion and vibes about a story. I love the Cybermen design. I love the Cybermen voices. I've talked about the compromises I have to make in my own sort of mental gymnastics I have to go through in order to enjoy them. But I do. It's actually, no, that's a lie. It's not hard. I don't have to pretend to myself that I think they're good. I think they're good. They really work for me. But I have that Doctor Who fan thing of having an eye on what other people may think, and I would completely buy it, because it was my first opinion of them based on that Target novel and the pictures, and in comparison to my the received wisdom of what the Cybermen were, which was more like the Invasion Cybermen, to suddenly go, and that's what they look like. They were always substandard to me when I was younger, and then I watched them when I saw them in action for the first time and went, oh, they're pretty good, but that's a bit like me, supporting the underdog in the FA Cup final. I suspect there's part of me going, yeah, but I want them to be good, but I was definitely pleasantly surprised. Again, I probably because I thought I was, that's a proper Doctor Who fan, that, isn't it? That I was able to see and appreciate them. Well, no, I wasn't, because I wasn't trying to impress anybody. No, I genuinely was pleasant surprised when I saw them in action. But I think, again, I've probably over the years, felt that maybe I was giving them a helping hand. But I think they genuinely work for me. But I suspect had my partner or my brother or somebody been here when this was on, or even my kids, they might have suppressed a little smile to themselves. But I love the 10th Planet Cybermen. I wonder if they might be my overall thing, because if I was going to choose them, really, this is the episode where they come into the fore, and I adore that scene where they explain who they are. I love the fact it's Barclay and Polly, because this isn't a case of episode 3 where Barclay takes a lot of the Doctor's lines or some of Ben's lines or whatever and gets a bit more to do. This was as planned, but the Doctor takes a back seat. I enjoy the fact that the helpful scientist in the base is the one that leads the questioning alongside Polly. I love the fact that she is part of that sort of three-way exchange with the very chatty. He's called Krang, isn't there? Called Krang, Shav, and Talon, or is he Krail? Yeah, it's Krail, Shav, and Talon, and it's Krang, Jarl, and Gurn in episode 4, isn't it? I mean, I sort of love the fact that they have names, but again, that's another thing that they didn't really go for. I know in the book of the Moonbase, isn't it, and indeed in some of the script of the Moonbase, the cyber leader is called Tarn, but then they stop having names, and again, maybe that's just because of what I'm used to, is that Cybermen don't have names. That's how I expect them to be. But it's the fact that they've got names, but the fact that they're called Krail, or I mean Krang is even better. But Shav, I think, is my favourite. It's Talon is a bit too on the nose because we know what a Talon is, and so it's a scary sounding name for a claw or whatever. So you can see where they've come for that. Krang, I think you can see where they come from because it's some sort of metallic sound. But Shav, Shav is a great name. But I love that exchange, even though Roy Skelton, who is playing Cyberman voice, and he must know he's playing Cyberman voice, pronounces cybernetic. So the Cybermen can't actually pronounce the procedure which produced the technology that has also led to their name. But I love that scene. That was another one that I could probably do without the script. I could probably give you chapter and verse on it because I've gone through it in my head and sometimes out of my mouth. So I love that scene. I do love the snowy waste stuff, although we've got more of that next week. So maybe there's not much of it this week, but it's worth mentioning that I think the South Pole setting is really helpful. The fact that we've got that outside, and it's a great way of introducing the Cybermen as well, because they don't feel the cold, so the humans are out there wrapped up and shivering, and these guys just sort of wander through it, no problem. And that's a great way of establishing, their might, as well as the fact that they break people's necks and all of that. So it's a great way to introduce them. It makes them feel definitely like a new and formidable foe. So what is my favourite? Now, do you know what? I think coming into this, I was like, it's going to be obvious. It's going to be the confrontation. It's going to be the David Doddermead, Annika Wills, Reg Whitehead three-hander where we learn all about the Cybermen, just because I think it's nicely written, it's excitingly written, and it's a compelling and interesting scene. But I think as I get older and take some of the standard parts of Who less for granted, because the reason we take them for granted is because they are televisual miracles, and I think because he'd been and gone by the time I was cognizant of Doctor Who, William Hartnell was the dead one, and because for years, this was William Hartnell's last story, but I didn't know the makeup of it, and didn't realise that didn't think too hard about the fact that this is really his last hurrah. Yes, he is in episode 4, but we can't see that. And I think the fact that we have that speech, love, pride, hate, fear, have you no emotion, sir? I would like to choose that moment, not just because we see it in Earthshock, it then comes back in Twice Upon a Time, so it's, a recognisable, fantastic moment of Doctor Who, but because it's him, and because it's him not on his last legs. It's interesting that he's sitting down, much as he is. In total command, it's a good performance. It's nice seeing Hartnell sort of triumphing in this modern setting. He's not the sort of Edwardian adventurer, juxtaposed with a strange space setting or fitting in nicely, knowing what to do in an historical one, but actually holding his own in hard-nosed military bases, and you can imagine probably, facing off government ministers or figures of authority, and he's not, the eccentric old guy isn't fazed by this, isn't diminished by a setting that you might think was not one that he suited. He's a doctor that works equally well. So yeah, I had no intention of going for this when I went into this episode. I thought it was going to be a face-off between the Cybermen, that first Cyberman scene, dialogue exchange, or that wonderful cliffhanger, which is one of my favourite cliffhangers. And I know it needn't be, but because there are plenty of cliffhangers that are more interesting or better executed. Actually, there's nothing wrong with the execution. It's nicely done. It's nice. I have a soft spot for the cliffhanger. I just can't quite explain why, apart from the fact that it's slightly different. No, I think it's really, really well done. So I thought I was going to go for any of those things, but I think the fact that we as viewers, as Doctor Who fans, don't see Hartnell again, apart from as a shadow of his former self, as it were, in the Three Doctors, and animated or reconstructed in episode 4. But even then, even with your actual episode 4, he doesn't have an awful lot to do in that episode, and there's no last hurrah. I think that speech that he gives there is kind of his last hurrah. So William Hartnell and that love, pride, hate, fear, have you no emotion, sir, because it also, it's such a good clip that sums up exactly what the Cybermen are, that it was used to sort of reintroduce them in Earthshock after they'd been away for a while. It was used to illustrate their backstory with the Doctor, and also it was used to then segue us into the David Bradley version of William Hartnell, Twice Upon a Time. So yeah, it's just a great moment, and it's nicely shot, and Hartnell owns the frame and all of that. So William Hartnell and that love, pride, hate, fear speech, for what it says about him, what it says about the Cybermen, how recognisable it is to us, and the fact that it's really good. What does Martin think?
I think that I might have cheated a little by listing all those great things about Part 1, so I'll try and keep it as simple as we reflect upon what is the last full episode that we can see featuring William Hartnell as the Doctor. I think my favourite thing about episode 2 is quite simply those sinister and uncaring cloth-faced Cybermen, which were so easily effective that they were resurrected 50 years later. And perhaps most particularly, their peculiarly odd manner of speaking. It's some kind of wonderful.
I mean, I should have thought there really that the obvious. I'm not being disparaging of Martin and saying it's obvious. The obvious choice, because they're so damn good, is to choose the Cybermen, because this is the episode where they come into the fore. But I thought, well, no, I'll choose them as my overall thing. Well, I now can't, because Martin has chosen them. So that was daft of me, because in fact he's more likely to choose William Hartnell as his bonus thing, isn't he? I that was a bad manoeuvre, because I would like to go on record as having the 10th Planet Cybermen as one of my favourite things of the 10th Planet, and I've missed the opportunity, because if you're unaware of the rules, which are very loose, if Martin's already chosen it, I can't choose it, because that would be silly, because I wouldn't get the point for it, because he's not going to choose it again. But by the same token, if he chooses William Hartnell now, or if he chooses that speech, well, we'll see how he phrases it. I might claw a point back, but it doesn't matter, because I've lost the point that I could have got from the Cybermen. So that perhaps I needed to be a bit more logical. Perhaps I needed to have been cybernized in order to have prospered there, and that I let my emotions, my emotional attachment to William Hartnell, get the better of me. And so maybe to prosper in happy times and places, I need to gradually replace my flesh with plastic and metal, and my brain with a computer, to remove those weaknesses. Oh, but for now, I do have emotion, sir, and my emotion is one of great happiness, not only watching the 10th Planet along with the great and the emotion that Martin exudes his cheerful engagement and bonhomie watching the 10th Planet, not only with the contribution of Martin, but along with all those people whose comments I read out at the beginning, who are overjoyed and comforted by this story. It's a story about cruel, emotionless, strength of 10 men, alien, quite ruthless alien invaders, thinking nothing of killing people, and yet somehow it comforts us. What does that say about us and how we process our emotions? Ha ha ha! But yes, we're loving the 10th Planet, and it's very much a 10 in this neck of the woods, in more than just name. Let's see if it can continue that way with the last fully existing episode of William Hartnell's reign, which sadly, as we will see, does not have him in it, when you join me in this happy, that's an emotion, times and place, this happy time and place next time. But for now, well, I'm looking forward to future episodes. There are hundreds of them, but they're not yet in formation. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Martin Holmes, who can be found on Twitter at MAW_H. All the letters are capitals, and he also has a podcast, Vision on Sound, and the A to Z of television. I'm grateful to Martin and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Paul Dunn, El Pandras, Susie Ferguson, Jason Gorman, Siobhan Galichon, Paul Harris, Chris Hyam, Ian Key, Ashley Knight, Joe Llewellyn, Philip Marsh, Nathan Martin, Roland Moore, Rick Moran, Kevin Murdoch, Graham Knott, Adam Parker, Barry Platt, Risto Matti Sarillo, Frank Shales, Andrew and Lisa, Catherine Armitage, John Arnold, Kevin Ashelford, Luke Adkins, James Bell, David Bickley, Will Brooks, Gary Byrne, Robin Bland, Robbie C., John Curley and Mark Dakin. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like your name read out on the credits, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock and sign up for as little as £3 a month. You can also sign up for free, but I haven't worked out quite what to do with that yet, so nobody's getting much. But if you are a paid patron, you get your name read out on the credits, and you also get access to bonus material, monthly AMAs, an exclusive podcast all your own, some clips of my comedy, some pictures of my dog, but also behind-the-scenes videos from the various Doctor Who Blu-ray extras that I make. All sorts of goodies, usually 3 things a week, and also a chance to contribute and make your comments on the stories, as you heard at the beginning. And it's lovely there, and I'm really inspired to read all the stuff that I do. It's just a hotbed of enthusiasm, really, and it's nice, especially as the internet itself seems to be getting more and more toxic and unpleasant, and indeed as the outside world too. I'm retreating ever more into my polar base. The more I encounter the outside world, which seems, as cold and unforgiving as the Arctic wastes. But listen, become a patron, and I'll keep doing this stuff, and indeed, hopefully, improve upon it and make it better and do more exciting things. You can also support these, if you'd prefer to do it in a different way, by going to ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock. That's KO-FI. It's a way of pretending that you're buying a coffee, whereas what you're doing is, helping to fund these, but you don't have a monthly commitment, nor unless you have any bonuses, but it's just a way of dropping in every now and again to lend your support. But if you cannot do the financial side of things, which I totally understand, and I'm very grateful to you for listening, you can make it known how much you like these, if indeed you do, by giving them 5 stars, by liking and subscribing and spreading the word on iTunes, Apple, Patreon, Spotify, even on YouTube now. So there are all sorts of different ways to consume them, and everywhere that they are, if they get all of those bits of positive feedback and top scores that you can give them, it really just helps to get them out there to more and more people, and I'd be really, really grateful. Social media is undergoing a change. As I record this, I've just got over to Blue Sky to sign up there. I am still on Twitter/X. I don't quite know how I feel about where and when I am. I'm keeping my options open, but I went over to Blue Sky at the request of some people, and I've been quite touched and flattered by the amount of followers that quickly took me up on there. So I will try to deliver there as well, if indeed I did, as on other platforms. I also have a Facebook page. I'm also on Instagram at toby.haydock. I have a website, tobyhaydock.com, and I have something else. What's the other thing? There's so much out there. I'm just spending all day on my computer saying, this is what I think and this is what I'm up to. I have a YouTube channel. I've got it all. You can't escape me, especially as my name is impossible to confuse with anybody else's. So if you type it in and it's there and it's me, that's it. Well, unless somebody's done an AI fruity video, and then it's definitely not me. I've not been involved in any fruity videos, but I'm sure they can make them. I'm sure somebody will be able to make. Stop talking, Toby. Don't give people ideas. Okay. Anyway, yes, I'm all over the internet, but not on any sites with an X in them. Well, I am, because Twitter's called X now. So should we just? I think I'm just going to stop there. That was really most unfortunate. I should not have done that. Oh, well, there we are. Yeah, I do like that episode, and I hope you do too. And I don't really have much to say in the post credits bit of this bit. Apart from Matt from Metapenis 3, I did like your suggestion of because I was explaining in the post credits of the last one how I sometimes put off doing a new series episode because they're a bit longer and they take a bit more work and I'm less familiar with them. And Matt suggested splitting them in two. I just think that would feel a bit ugly to me because they don't have a natural break. And also, I think once I'm doing them, the momentum is fine. It's not like I struggle for things there. And I think I would probably, because my memory is so bad. For example, I've even forgotten what Frank was alluding to with George Blake at the beginning there. I think I better to just keep going, lest the second half be like having a conversation with my old nan, where you just go sort of round in circles saying, 10 minutes after she said, would you like a biscuit? She says, would you like a biscuit? And then you go, no, I've already had one, thank you. And then tells you the same stories that she told you 10 minutes ago. So, let's avoid that happening by I'll go all the way through. But I appreciate the suggestion, Matt, and I appreciate you listening right to the end, right to this bit, which I'm assuming you've done again. So I'll leave the very last thank you to you and all of your kind who stay right to the end, to the bitter end, as bitter as a South Pole winter.